Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Barovsky, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda, and happy Hanukkah, which is the time we're recording this. It'll be long past by the time this is published, but still wonderful holiday greetings to all.
Thank you. And today is another Ask David when we have Matt May here to add his magic to our podcast episode. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Rhonda. Hi, David. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, we love it when you're on the show. And
me too.
We get so many wonderful comments every time you appear.
So today is this.
They're not about you, though. They're about me.
I'm here to make you shine, David.
Matt, you look great in comparison to that Matt.
I'm here to make you shine.
Yeah. No, we're just thrilled to have you every time, and so is our audience.
It's lovely to be back. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is the second episode of 2022, and I wanted to take the time to thank everyone who helped support this podcast. First, I want to thank Fabrice Nye, who started this podcast 4 years ago, which is amazing. And I want to also thank my most amazing son, Josh Freund, who does all the audio editing for us. And he helps keep me calm when there are tech problems, which there seem to be often. I also want to thank Brandon Vance, who also helps occasionally with the audio editing. And I especially want to thank our regular contributors like Matt and Jill Levitt. I want to thank all our fabulous guests. And mostly I want to thank our dedicated listeners who tune in every week and send David and me really cool endorsements and emails about how much they like the podcast or what mistakes we made and what they want to see differently. And really, I want to thank you, David, for, providing me with the opportunity to be your co-host, your host on the podcast, and for, originally thinking up and creating the brilliant team therapy method. And I have a poem I've picked out that I'd like to dedicate for you by one of your most favorite poets, Emily Dickinson.
Thank you, Rhonda. And before you read it, I am so grateful for you. Every day, you've brought joy into my life. You've brought happiness and lightness and laughter and tears and drama to the podcast. And you've just brought joy into the lives of so many people who love you and appreciate you. And I'm number one on that list.
Oh, thank you. Here's the poem. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life, the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin onto his nest again, I shall not live in vain.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. And Emily Dickinson's life was very, very moving. I think I've mentioned before that she was at Amherst. That's where she lived a couple hundred years ago, whenever it was, 150 years ago. And when I went to Amherst, I thought of her as a kind of silly poet for like greeting cards or something, like limericks. And then, and of course, at Amherst, they explained her poetry and realized how powerful it was and how powerful her message was, that it's only through loss that we really gain. And her life was a life of deprivation and loss. And I was very, very moved ever since then by Emily Dickinson. We used to go and visit her grave. And I think I told you once I even knocked on the door of the house where she used to live, and the owners let me in and let me look around, and I found a little poem on a slip of paper on a windowsill there. I guess they carefully placed it there for people to notice, but it was she was an inspiration. And then I bought, when I was a student, I didn't have much money, and I'm a slow reader, but I bought the complete works of Emily Dickinson. It was 3 volumes, and they had not only all of her poems, but all of the drafts, so you could see her thinking evolving as she modified them. But what a fantastic poet, and in a way kind of a mystic she was. But yeah, let's
And David,
hear it.
didn't you write a poem either about Emily Dickinson or
that was
published?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. I was going back to Amherst. I visited a friend in New York. Paul Stern stayed at his house. I got the flu, and we had to take a bus back to Amherst. And I had it was on a Sunday night, and I had to remembered on the bus I had a creative writing assignment, and I had a fever. I was semi-delirious at the time. And so I did some scribbling on a piece of paper, and I thought I could at least turn this in tomorrow. And I didn't even quite know what I'd written down. And then the professor, the following week or whenever the class met again, had taken it and had it typed up and distributed to the class. And then I didn't even know what it was about. I just thought it was gibberish. And then they said, "Oh, this is a poem about Emily Dickinson." And I said, "That's right. I hadn't realized it when I read it, when I wrote it." And then after I graduated, one of my classmates said, Emily Dickinson wrote this poem. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me, because she lived in deprivation, and man she loved was a married minister, and he moved to California to avoid scandal, and she was never really fulfilled in any of the things that she did. And so they said they're going to have this book, Emily Dickinson, Letters from the World. Like these are the letters that poets have wanted to send to you. And they said, "Why don't you submit your poem for that book?" And so I sent it in, and it became the centerfold of that book, Emily Dickinson, Letters from the World by Simric Press. And then I was asked to read it. One of the PsyD students found it and said, let's have an evening, and you can read your poem. And, and he made a little video of it. But he just had a home type camera. But there was, 30, 40 people came. And, when I read that poem, I just started crying. Anyway, I've just always loved the work of Emily Dickinson, and I've always loved working with people with depression who also feel that they've lost what they need for happiness and fulfillment, and then to bring joy to people who are depressed has always brought a lot of joy to me too.
Nice. I think I forgot to say what episode this is. So I just want to remind people, or say in the beginning, that this is episode 276. Okay. So why don't I read the first letter to you? And the title is, "Why is my dad the way he is, and why are people the way they are?" Hi, Dr. Burns, Dr. May, and Dr. Barovsky. I love your show. Keep up the good work. I deeply appreciate your time and insight. My dad is 70, and my mom is 67, and I am 38. Throughout my life, my dad has done things like he did earlier tonight. I was at my parents' house, and my mom was telling me how Thanksgiving was going to be at my parents' cabin with the whole family, like we have done years past, at which point my dad firmly said no. My mom asked why, and he just shook his head and shortly after walked out of the room to go to the bathroom, shut the door, and said no angrily 3 times in the other room to himself, but loud enough so she could hear. He seemingly randomly acts extremely possessive by angrily forbidding family get-togethers, or forbidding my mom from doing things, or from family to borrow things, he'll just say no without further explanation. Always upon asking why to his no, he'll either say angrily, because I said so, say nothing, or just repeat no further. My mom says sometimes, hey, can you give me a reason? And it's the same no, silence, or because I said so. I don't jump into the aforementioned back and forth communication because I know such a person can't be changed and I don't want to make an argumentative mess. My dad never displayed any comfort with expressing the slightest vulnerability. He's very, very silent. All of my life, he has displayed bullying type tendencies. Whenever I visit my parents, he always shows tremendous eagerness to want to scowl and berate people for the tiniest mistakes, even people he doesn't know in public, like cashiers. I think even the most skilled of 5 secret practitioners might be outmatched. My mom tonight and all my life has asked me, why is he like this? I've been haunted to try to understand this question all my life too. So I'm putting the question to you, Dr. Burns and Dr. May and Dr. Barovsky. Why is someone like this? You must have heard of similar situations and have some insight. I want to feel compassion and understanding for my dad, and I don't want to live with baggage. And mainly, I just want to relieve myself from anger, thinking, should, labeling, and overgeneralizing thoughts like, he shouldn't act like this. He shouldn't be such a bully. He's being a jerk. Thank you, Mark.
You want to go first here, Matt? Or
Well, I have a couple of things I would share on this. One is that as a father myself who makes a lot of errors in his parenting and whose children probably frequently think, well, why is Matt like this? I could just respond from my own perspective that oftentimes it's because I have some sense of anxiety or worry or a sense of urgency that I'll be sharp with my children. Like I'm afraid that they'll do something that actually could be bad for them. And I think if we were to positively reframe that feeling of anxiety that I feel, that it's really out of caring and love for my children that I'm acting like a jerk, which is very paradoxical. When the question came out, why is my dad like this? We could talk about that in a lot of detail, like probably some combination of genetics and influence from the environment, positive and negative reinforcement. But we could also see it, this is probably a hidden should statement, and that he's saying he wants to get over those shoulds. And I think that's the key, maybe part of the key is like he's probably blaming his father. And I noticed that in the dynamic with mom, father wasn't invited. No one was asking him what he wanted to do. He was just kind of being informed that this is what's going to happen. And I'm kind of putting together that there might not be an inclusiveness, that father might also be feeling excluded, rejected, and kind of worthless. Like he's not even worth including in the decision-making here, and that he may just in general be kind of afraid to be vulnerable if his perception is that people don't value his opinion or like him or want to include him. He may put on this strong outer shell of being kind of scowling and thinking that that's protecting him from getting rejected when it's actually causing him to be rejected. And then I think, David, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I think you'll have...
Steal away, Matt. That's
well,
cool.
I think you'll point out that the idea that he couldn't change is false, that dad couldn't change is false, that if he were given a different input, if his family were treating him differently, that they would see a different version of dad come out, and that there's likely an illusion of blame that's getting bought into, that dad is just this way, rather than dad is being forced to be this way due to what is happening on the outside. And so we can see like how empathy and agenda setting errors are combining here to make dad feel crummy and then respond crummy. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Matt. What you're saying, put it in my own words, which is to say the same thing slightly differently. I get a lot of emails like this. Why is so and so like this? And my answer is always the same: because you're forcing that person to be that way. But that's politically incorrect, and people get ticked off at me when I say things like that. But what I mean is that, you know, we're always blaming the other person for relationship problems, and you see it here, Mark. And I'm sorry, and I understand how frustrated and sad you feel, and how probably angry you feel too. But you're saying Dad's the problem. Why is he this way? I'm blaming him. You're looking outwardly for the solution. And mystics through the ages have said, look within. And I never knew what that meant until I got into this interpersonal model. And that's look at what you're doing that's forcing him to be that way. And give me a specific example. Like, for example, when Dad says no, he's trying to express something he feels very strongly. But then when Mom says why, it's an implied blame. She's really not saying, really, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? I really want to know. But it's kind of saying, why are you saying no, you jerk? That's how it comes off. And can't you just give me a reason? Means you don't have a good reason. So he's being put down. He's being forced. You're forcing him not to want to communicate with you by kind of blaming him and putting him down. It's true that he acts in a grumpy way, but the real question from your point of view, if you really want to change the situation, is look at how you respond, or your mother, for her to look at how she responds and how that's going to make him feel and how that's going to impact on this behavior. And so I wish when people would write in with a relationship example, use the relationship journal instead of asking these general questions, which you'll never learn anything from them. You either agree with David or disagree with David, but either way, you won't know what to do. Instead, here's what my dad said. No, here's what I said. Well, why not, Dad? And then analyze your response from EAR, empathy, assertiveness, and respect. And you'll see that you didn't empathize with him. You didn't share your feelings in a respectful way, and you didn't convey love or respect. And then what's the implication of that kind of response? Well, Dad will feel hurt, he'll feel put down, and he'll continue to clam up. And then you can use the 5 secrets of effective communication to respond more effectively. And then we could give you tips on your analysis and role play, how to respond more skillfully. And then you'd see what's really going on. And that's my message to everyone. When you write in with questions of a general nature, you're not going to get the aha answer that you're looking for. All the information comes through the specific application and looking at your own role when it comes to relationship problems. So that probably sounds harsh and uncaring. If so, I can only say it was intended to sound that way, because I think sometimes people need to be shaken by the shoulders, because as often as I've said this and written it in my book, Feeling Good Together, repeatedly, people don't seem to get the message. And I'm hoping that, but we did get one the other day. We'll put on a future Ask David, where a woman really did take heed. She was complaining about her husband and how he was being critical of the dog she adopted, or the cat, I think, a feral cat she adopted. And she was ticked off at him, but it was the same thing. She was acting in a very uncompassionate way. And when she used the relationship journal and sang a different tune, her husband suddenly warmed up and became very loving, and their relationship was quickly transformed. That's what I'm looking for in relationships, not kind of a general theoretical question about why are people the way they are. The answer to that is the one I've given for years. Scientists don't yet know why people are the way they are. But if I can tell you why you're having the problem you're having, and I can show you exactly how to solve that problem if you want to take that route. But it's painful because you have to look at yourself rather than blaming the other person.
And can I add something?
Please.
It seems like this family's in a pattern or a dance with each other, and they're saying, we don't know how to change this dance. But if just Mark did the changing, if just Mark looked at the conversation that he had and went through the relationship journal and the EAR process that you have, generously, it's in your books, Feeling Good and Feeling Great. Then I think if Mark could change, then his father would adapt and change too, because Mark would be breaking the pattern. Yeah.
The question isn't, can father change? The question is Mark willing to change? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to change? Not can the other person change. The other person can't not change. All human beings change constantly. It's impossible for human beings not to change. Change is the nature of human beings. It's ongoing and eternal. The question is, are you willing to change?
Cool. Okay. Here's our next question. What can you do about a positive distortion? How much information is there in your book, Feeling Good or Feeling Great, or in a particular podcast on how we address positive distortions most effectively? It is mentioned briefly that these can be more difficult to overcome because of the more positively perceived benefits, which may also be reinforced externally, such as, yes, he is such a nice person. Nobody wants him to express any frustration or anger occasionally. Not even he himself wants to do this. It affects motivation to any change, or at least creates ambivalence. Some more on this topic of positive distortions would be great, please. Thank you, Tilleridge.
You want to take first shot again, Matt?
Well, first, can you explain, I know you've talked about it before, but can you explain what's a positive distortion and why it's a problem?
Oh, yeah. In some of the early podcasts, probably the third or fourth, if you look at my website, feelinggood.com, and click on the Feeling Good Podcast tab, you'll see a list of all the podcasts. And I think there were two early podcasts, like numbers 3 and 4 or something like that, on the negative and positive distortions. And the quick answer to that is, you're probably familiar with my list of 10 negative distortions, like all or nothing thinking. If I'm not a complete success, I'm a total failure. An overgeneralization, because Tricia rejected me, all women will reject me, those distortions. But there's 10 positive distortions. There's a mirror image positive version of every negative distortion. So there's positive all or nothing thinking. And it's just the opposite. It's like, if I won the game or the promotion or whatever, then I'm a winner. And then positive overgeneralization and positive mental filtering and positive mind reading and positive fortune telling. And positive distortions cause a number of problems, habits and addictions. I'll just eat a little bit. One little bite of this glazed donut can't hurt. I deserve it because I've had a hard day. Those are all positive distortions, and all habits and addictions result from positive distortions. Mania is the prototypic positive distortion. I'm the greatest. People go into a psychotic state. They're thinking so positively about themselves and the world. I had a patient who had her first manic attack when she was downtown in Philadelphia, and there was a press conference involving the mayor, and she just became manic all of a sudden, ran up, grabbed the microphone out of the mayor's hand, and started babbling incoherently that she had a new plan for world peace. And she didn't realize there was anything inappropriate about what she was doing. And the police arrested her, and then they brought her to the hospital rather than jail, because they realized, she was in a state of mania. Narcissism is the narcissistic personality disorder is due to overly positive thinking as well. All violence, all wars result from positive distortions. Mm. And now I will turn it over to Matt, who's going to give us some really awesome information about positive distortions.
Thank you, David. I really like the way you expressed that. It didn't occur to me for a while that the word deserve is a should statement. And so that's a great example of like a positive distortion, like I deserve this piece of cake or what have you. Using some other examples might be, nothing could go wrong. People will do things that are quite risky or foolish if they're predicting in an all or nothing way that nothing could go wrong. And so, right, so you can distort reality in a positive or a negative way. And when it's in a positive way, it's oftentimes reinforced by these short-term gains. Like, it'll feel good to have that piece of cake now, but we won't achieve, optimal health if we're giving into that temptation over and over again. And so what do you do about it? And this is, I think, one of the greatest challenges for human beings, because we want that short-term reward. And you've developed awesome tools, David, to help people see through their temptation. The triple column technique, where we look at the advantages of the status quo thinking and behaviors, and we positively reframe that. We look at the downsides of change, like the deprivation we'd have to feel if we wanted to go without that piece of cake, and the advantages of feeling free and wild, and we can do whatever we want, are pretty big. And then just to see that this is something that person is unlikely to want to change because of all the advantages there are to it, and to get a clear sense of what the cost might be. And I think that other tools like the decision-making form, that once people are filling out the decision-making form, it invites them to look at the downsides very clearly of the current behavior, and to also look at the upsides of change. And I think seeing the upsides of change is very important for defeating the tempting thoughts. It's like, I want that cake, but I actually want to feel, I want to live longer, even more than I want this piece of cake right now. And so if you can out-tempt these tempting thoughts with something you want even more, using methods like the decision-making form and the devil's advocate technique. And then, David, you've got the habit and addiction log, which is useful just for picking out these thoughts that are controlling our behavior without our awareness.
Yeah, thanks for that. I might add, what's the date of this podcast going to be?
January 10th.
Okay, and then is it January 26th that you and I are giving a free 2-hour workshop for the general public and mental health professionals on just this topic? And we're going to show powerful tools for managing habits and addiction. So if you're have a secret habit or addiction, nail biting or overeating or drinking or binging or internet surfing or whatever your habit or addiction might be, this will be an actual interactive workshop where you'll get to learn some of these powerful tools, like the triple paradox that Matt mentioned, the devil's advocate technique, and more. And in addition, if you want to read up on it ahead of time, there's 2 free chapters that you can get on my homepage of my website. These are unpublished chapters from my new book, Feeling Great. There were too many chapters. It was too big a book, so I had to cut out 9 of the chapters. And the 2 on habits and addictions are really dynamite. I shouldn't say that, but they're really clear, step-by-step, how to use some of these tools. And the way you do it, you go to my website, feelinggood.com, and at the bottom of the homepage, it says, get your free book by clicking here, your free chapter. And then you actually get 2 chapters from that were intended for feeling great. So feel free to do that. But yes, the positive distortions are very dangerous, because the patient who's manic, who's narcissistic, who's angry, who's enraged, isn't motivated to look at their distortions. They want to blame the other person. They want to see themselves as morally superior, and the people that they're mad at as rats or losers or jerks. And that's why so much of the world's suffering comes from positive distortions or negative distortions. The positive distortions cause the war, the sadistic cruelty, the vengeful righteous behavior, and the negative distortions cause the depression, the anxiety, the guilt, the shame, the hopelessness, inadequacy, and more. So thanks for that great question, Tila Rick. I hope we at least pointed you a little bit in the right direction.
And if you want to learn more, I looked up what episodes talk about positive distortions, and it's episodes 10, 11, and 12.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you can find that on the website. You just go to the podcast tab and you'll see the list of all the podcasts with links to the podcast plus the show notes.
And on our episode 272, which was also an Ask David that was published December 13th, there was a question on should statements. And it's such a popular question that we have another question about should statements from Johnny, who asked, can you help me disprove my negative thoughts? I managed to disprove them, but they return after a few hours. Here are some. A loser is someone who lives at home with his parents after he turns 18. I should be bold, confident, and secure. I should be better than I am.
And Matt, I'll let you kick it off again.
Yeah, so I've struggled with my own shoulds intermittently in my life. David, that was the first thing that you helped me with in a kind of miraculous experience. I still look back on it as one of the main reasons I became a psychiatrist, was that I could see how powerful your methodology is and how helpful it is in a very brief period of time. We had time for me to overcome tremendous guilt and still go get a hamburger afterwards. So
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was great. And one of the main sticking points for me is that I had all this. It seemed like my shoulds were really good for me to keep, that it was part of my morality, that I shouldn't accept this version of me. I should be better. And I shouldn't celebrate. I should suffer until I'm better. And you helped me just kind of list all these reasons why I wanted to keep my should statements and tell myself I should be better and beat up on myself. And that then allowed me to see the flip side, which I could see that just beating up on myself wasn't leading to improvement, and beating up on myself wasn't something that I would do to anyone else. It didn't really match my morality. I thought it was such a moral thing for me to beat up on myself, but I wouldn't do that to someone else. And so my morality was actually quite flawed. And when I started to see that, that's when I was able to talk back to those should statements using methods like the semantic technique was one that was beneficial. But we've got many different methods, but that first step is so crucial, is to understand that there's this part of us that's convinced that we need to beat up on ourselves and to tell ourselves we're a loser. And we've got to get in touch with that before change is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that was a touching experience. It was very moving for me also. And I think that you had been earlier in the day. It was one night that you were the only one who showed up at the Tuesday group, because we were pretty small in the early days. And so I said, well, why don't we just use the time, if you've got a personal issue, we could work on it. And I think you'd been walking into some hospital, and some father with his little boy was walking out, and the father was shouted at his boy or hit his son in the face or something like that.
The boy was terrified. He was being taken into the hospital, and I think his father had this big manila envelope with all his medical records, and the boy was screaming, trying to go, no, let's not go there. That's where the bad things happen to me. And then he swatted his son right in the face with this heavy stack of notes. And it just broke my heart to see that. And I desperately wanted to be able to say something to help that boy in some way. And I couldn't think of anything, and just was sort of, my jaw fell. And then I started to really beat up on myself and wish that I had known what to say. And I was telling myself
something. I should have known what to do. Yeah,
I should have known what to say.
And so that's all. That was the big switch in my career. It's so simple to see it. I got annoyed when other people can't see it, but I myself couldn't see it for the first 7 or 8 years of my career, that the reason people get stuck in negative thoughts and the reason they keep coming back, as you asked, Johnny, is because we're motivated to have those thoughts. And until you deal with that resistance to change, all the techniques in the world aren't going to do any good. In the show notes, if you read the show notes for this episode, I must have listed at least 15 or 20 techniques that you can use to crush should statements like the ones you have. But the fact is, this is kind of what Karen Horney said, your ideal self. You see, you have an ideal self and a real self. And your ideal self is bold, confident, and secure. And I take it your real self often feels not bold, not confident, and insecure. And so what people do is they beat up on their real self, thinking if you beat up on yourself enough, eventually you're going to turn into this ideal self. And I can remember that time when we were in the car coming home from supervision, and probably the zillionth time I've told this story, but it's one of my favorites, that we used to do when you were a resident, like 2-3 hours a week of supervision. We'd have pizza downtown at that place that had that great pizza. And then we'd talk cases and your personal issues, and we'd drive home. And we were driving home and went to a stop sign. And you looked at me with these sincere, deep eyes and said, Dr. Burns, I just want you to know I'm trying so hard to become a better and better person every day. And then I looked back at you with equally sincere, deep eyes and said, Matt, I hope you get over that one of these days. And then you got it, and you burst into laughter. And that was your moment of enlightenment, or maybe your first moment of enlightenment. But it's that the decision has to be made. Am I willing to let up on myself? Do I intend to beat up on myself in this way? And then one of the things we would do is list all the things that these negative thoughts show about you, Johnny, that's positive and awesome. And then raise the question, maybe this isn't something that you want to give up on. So
should we support Johnny and like come up with some ideas for him about positively refrain?
Yeah. Let's do it. By the way, did we give the date of our workshop, Rhonda?
Yes,
time?
It's January 26th.
And how do they find out about it?
Would they go to your website?
Yeah, probably, or go to the PESI website. I'll be sending out my mailing list. Get on my mailing list, and then I'll be sending out the registration link. And it's totally free. And if you can't attend at the 2 hours when it's scheduled, if you register, you'll get access to the video, I think for a month or something, maybe forever after the actual workshop. So you'll be able to look at it at your own leisure. But yeah, what do his negative thoughts show about him, Rhonda? Of course, we'd have to ask him and see if he's willing to do this. But what are some? There's 3 things. Why are his negative thoughts appropriate is question number 1. Number 2, what are some benefits of these negative thoughts? And number 3, what do these negative thoughts show about him and his core values that's positive or even awesome?
Well, I think the first one, a loser is someone who lives at home with his parents after he turns 18, shows that he really wants more for himself in life.
Absolutely, and he doesn't want to be just living at home and depending on his parents. He wants to become independently, develop his own support system, his own family, and so forth. So that's certainly a positive and real and powerful motivation. But what's so great about telling yourself you should be confident and bold and secure, Rhonda?
Well, it's motivating. It can be motivating, and it also shows what high standards he's setting for himself, a high bar for life, goals that he wants to reach.
Mm-hmm. And any other positives you see in these negative thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I think he's wanting to take a real honest assessment of himself. Like he's not pulling any punches. He's criticizing himself. He's his own worst critic here, and you could say that that's kind of an important thing, to be willing to look at what are our ways in which we can grow and improve, and part of his honesty maybe, or integrity, to be okay, I've got these things where I want to improve on.
Right. I love that. And also it shows that he's humble rather than arrogant and braggy. And it also shows that he's accountable. He's looking within rather than blaming the world or blaming others. And if we went through his negative feelings, like he's probably feeling depressed, anxious, guilty, ashamed, inadequate, lonely, discouraged, frustrated, maybe even angry, we could go through each emotion and come up with many positives. Again, what these feelings show about his core values, it's positive and awesome. What benefits there are to feeling, guilty and ashamed and hopeless and discouraged and anxious and depressed and so forth. And make a tremendous list of. We'd come up with at least 20 to 25 positives, and then we would ask Johnny, well, given all of these positives, why would you want to press our magic button and suddenly have all these negative thoughts and feelings disappear? Because then all these positives are going to go down the drain along with your negative thoughts and feelings. Why in the world would you want to do that? It makes no sense. And now we've put Johnny into a kind of paradox where on the one hand, he wants to get better, but on the other hand, he has to admit that there's these over 20 positive, real and important positives that have been hidden in his negative thoughts and feelings. And then many people reconcile that paradox or dilemma with a magic button, choosing to lower his emotions to some lower level, but not to want to make them disappear entirely. And then once he does that, like maybe he'd be willing to lower his shame from 90% to 20%, for example, and lower his depression from 80% to maybe 15% is enough depression, or maybe 5% is enough. And then once we've done that, then we've melted away the resistance, and then we would come in with all of these techniques that you can read about on the website. But just one of them, I said to Johnny, our son is living with us right now, and we're thrilled to have him. And he's, between career choices, and he wants to have a little time to decide what he's going to do next. And we're absolutely delighted to have him, but maybe we're mistaken. Maybe you'd want to write him an email. I can give you his email if you like, Johnny, and then you can let him know he's a failure or a loser or whatever. A loser. Yeah. And then the purpose of that would be, obviously you wouldn't want to do that to David's son, who David loves and who's really a pretty awesome guy. And if you wouldn't act like that to someone else you care about, maybe you'd consider not beating up on yourself in the same cruel way. And that would just be one of 20 techniques we could use.
Awesome. Okay, here's the next one. How can you talk to someone who refuses to talk to you? Hi, Dr. Burns. I came across your book and podcasts during a time in which I was having a hard time communicating with my adult son. They have helped me tremendously in acknowledging my part in our problem. While I've done a lot of work on my own self-esteem, anxiety, and depression, sadly, it has come a little too late, as my son does not want to talk to me, and we are estranged. Any thoughts or advice on how to reach out to a loved one in this situation? Now that I have been practicing the 5 secrets, I want to better connect with my son and work through our issues. Thank you, Shelley.
I'll just say quickly, Matt might want to add to this, is that in my book, Feeling Good Together, there's a chapter called How to Talk to Someone Who Refuses to Talk to You. And we spell out exactly the techniques to use, multiple choice empathy, multiple choice disarming, stroking, I feel statements. It's quite an art form. It's one of the advanced secrets of effective communication, and that would be an awfully good starting point. And then maybe send an email with your a paper and pencil example, or which you could type into the email to let me see how you're catching on and how you might use this with your son. Back to you, Matt.
Yeah, I love those ideas. The multiple choice empathy was the first method that I was thinking of, just to be able to communicate to the son that we've noticed that he's not wanting to speak to us right now, and that we can accept that. And we're also curious, is that because they're feeling angry with us, or do they feel hopeless that we would be able to connect with them, or are they afraid to talk to us? Or is there something going on that they're too embarrassed to talk about with us, and to hit the main emotions and see how they could be causing this outcome? Because we're quite in the dark if this person doesn't want to talk to us, but we can still have this kind of shotgun effect of trying to hit multiple different pieces of empathy. Another method might be the forced empathy exercise, where we would ask the other person to play the role of the person they're in conflict with.
Then let's be specific here. We'd ask Shelley to play the role of her son, who won't talk to her. Correct. Yeah, and their son on truth serum. So there's no gaminess or passive aggression, but they would just be answering questions like, could you explain why is it that you wouldn't want to talk to your father? Or Shelley, to your mom. Isn't Shelley a woman's name?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd ask Shelley, you're acting like your son, and whatever her son's name is, let's say it's Dave. We'd say, Dave, can you describe the problems you're having with your mom? So that Shelley would then talk through Dave's voice.
Yeah, and hopefully also feel the feelings and get a sense of, okay, what are the feelings that are we would be otherwise just guessing at.
Yeah, so this can produce the understanding, and another common reason which you can use in forced empathy or in multiple choice empathy, multiple choice disarming, and you did a beautiful job on that. But there's one other reason that's important. You might say to your son, let's say his name is Dave, and I'm Shelley. I might say, I've just been noticing that you don't want to talk to me most of the time, and I'm sad about that because I love you, and I'm trying to understand why that is, because I think you've got really good reasons not to want to talk to me. And I'm not trying to get you to talk to me now. I just want to have you let me know, even with a nod of the head or something, if I'm on the right track or if I'm on the wrong track. But one of the reasons that, sometimes I don't want to talk to someone is when I think they haven't been a good listener, that they argue with me, they try to tell me what to do, they don't listen. When I think back on our conversations, I'm kind of embarrassed and ashamed to realize that I've done that to you an awful lot. And if so, you have every right to be really pissed off at me and to, kind of freeze me out and not want to talk to me, because it would seem like a waste of time. And then, of course, the other reasons you mentioned, Matt, but you might not want to talk to me because you're angry with me. Sometimes I don't want to talk to people when I'm pissed off at them, or you might be upset about something that you're embarrassed about or ashamed that you don't want to talk about. And I'm just wondering if any of these resonate with you at all. And if you do that with the humility and warmth, which most people actually won't do and can't do and don't want to do, because you feel like it's the other person's fault. But if you'll do that with a humble heart, more than 90% of the time, the person will suddenly open right up and say, well, yeah, that's it, Mom. You're always arguing with me, and you get very, very defensive, and you never listen to me. And then if he says that, then you're in the chips, because then you can disarm and say, wow, you're right. And I have done that to you. And I've only recently dawned on me, tell me what that's like. I can imagine you feel lonely and hurt and angry with me. I'm ready to listen now, and I want to hear what you have to say. What you're saying is so important. And so here you're expressing love, you're giving him a compliment, you're finding truth in what he has to say, you're making it easy for him to express his anger. And that would be the way out of the woods. But that involves the death of the self. and looking at yourself for the solution rather than blaming the other person. And that can be powerful, but to use the Robert Frost poem, I would say that's the road less traveled by, unfortunately.
Mm. Well, I hope some of these thoughts and supportive statements that you and Matt have suggested really resonate with Shelley, because we all have children, we all have sons, and it would really be tragic for Shelley to lose her connection with her son.
Yeah. By the way, here is my son, who just appeared. I was just talking about you on a podcast. Yeah. Do you want to come and say hello? Yeah. Well, it's great. Our podcasts are filled with interruptions. Right. Yeah. Good to see you. You're looking hunky. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, do we have time for one more?
Yeah. Isn't that Nate? They probably can't hear you too good.
No, we can't hear him.
You can't hear him.
But I can see the great smile on your face, David, of happiness to be there with him.
My dad wanted me to make a guest appearance. I just want to say hello to Matthew May and Rhonda Barovsky.
Eric, great to see you.
Great to see you, Eric.
These are some heroes. It's the Hogan's heroes. It's the League of Legends that are on the call right now. Well, it's cool. It's good to see your smiling faces. Thank you for this guest appearance.
Yeah, sweet.
All right, love you guys. All right. So great. Okay.
Yeah, he said Warriors by 10 tonight in the basketball game. So, so anyway, we had another question, but we'll save that for another day, I think.
Okay.
So we don't keep you over time, Matt, because I know you've got. Who are you supervising tonight? Anyone I know?
Oh, let's violate her
Zaina
confidentiality.
Yeah.
Zaina, I thought so. Yeah, from our Tuesday group. She is fantastic lady.
Yeah, and she won't mind that you announced her name on.
I think she would be okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. we should get her on a podcast here one of those days.
Yeah, I think that's in the works, as a matter of fact.
Well, thank you, Matt. How was it for you today?
Fantastic. I just wanted to offer you positive feedback, David. I thought your response there was just beautiful with the disarming and the I feel statements, and you really did a beautiful job there. And I always learn from you. I'm always grateful for all that you do to teach so many people. And thanks for having me on the show. It was great.
Yeah, it's great having you on. It wasn't cool the way Eric suddenly appeared?
Yes.
Like magic.
Like we're talking about sons, and there's your son.
Yeah. Okay, well,
till next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Matt.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Barovsky, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.